after each speaker, but the deliberative process and the conversation we'll have afterwards will be the same idea, the same steps along the way. The only difference is focus on the alternative advantage or drawback for your arterial way.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gibson. I'm the Director of Financial Planning and Analysis for the Engineering Group at the City. And today I'm going to talk to you briefly about how we plan for the capital of the City. Cover a little bit about the framework we do around city building, some comments around financial sustainability, and then at the end I have some slides around the 2019 to 2022 capital plan. So today the City of Vancouver has about $25 billion worth of assets in our portfolio. And actually, one of the biggest areas is what you don't see, and it's all that underground infrastructure, the water and the sewer pipes underground. And following that is the transportation network. So that would be roadways, street lighting, bridges as examples. So when we look at the evolution of the City of Vancouver back in the early 1900s is when we started putting in some of that core infrastructure. So the water, sewer pipes, fire halls, parks. And as the city's population in the city continued to grow, you see the focus start to change. And when we're looking here today and as we look out into the future, a lot of the conversations are around active transportation, childcare, social housing, to name a few. But aging infrastructure is an important thing to remember. So when we look at above ground infrastructure, so that's buildings and roadways, the average useful life is around 50 to 70 years. And when we think about that underground infrastructure, those water and sewer pipes, they actually live a bit longer. So they're more like 80 to 100 years. But thinking back to that previous slide, you're thinking in the early part of the 1900s, pre and post-war era, we put all those pipes coming in the ground. So now all of those are coming to their natural life cycle, and we need to plan for that. So the comprehensive city building framework that we use first starts at really a vision statement. So really up at that 30-year outlook, what do we want the city to be? And as we move down from that visioning statement and aspirational piece into strategy, that's when we start thinking about the how. So this city has a bunch of strategies complemented with community plans that speaks about that overriding, how are we going to deliver on that dream? We move further down and we get into about a 5 to 10 year horizon, and here's where we're planning. So we have a strategic capital outlook, and then moving down even further, now we're getting into this sort of 1 to 5 year plan, and this is where we start building out the capital plan and the budgets to support that. When we get into service delivery, then we enter a monitoring phase. And that's a really important phase because at that point, you're really circling back to the top and saying, is the stuff we're building actually helping us achieve our strategic objectives? So you might look at things like what's happening with walking and cycling, what's happening with garbage collection across the city and how much we're collecting. And so then it all becomes a bit of a cycle as you go through and ensure you're achieving what you're trying to achieve. Some of the long-term strategies at the city, I think some of these have come up yesterday in your conversation. Greenest City, Transportation 2040, the city's digital strategy. And then that's complemented with community plans, really recognizing the diversity across the city and the different areas of the city. And as part of the community plan, we look at those public benefit strategies. So not just building new amenities and new structure, but looking at our existing infrastructure and how we continue to support it. So our actual moving now into that 10-year time horizon, and this is quite timely because actually last year was when we finished this planning work, and 2019 is actually our first year of our new capital plan. So in that 10-year look, we're really talking about, from those strategies and those community plans, what are the objectives we see as priorities coming into that 10-year window? You know, at this level, it's an exercise we go through every 4 years, and we're kind of assigning order of magnitude funding. So we don't necessarily have secured the funding, but we've got a sense of the scale of how much funding is going to be required. Then we come into a 4-year capital plan. So here we might actually have defined some of the programs and projects that we intend to do, and we assign overall funding. So when we get into the capital plan, this is the point where we start making sure that we've got the money, or the money's going to come in to help support the plan. But even in this phase, we're actually still in a planning phase. So this isn't an approval until we get to our annual budget. And in the annual budget, which goes to council in December every year, this is when we're asking council for project approval. So with that, we actually assign project-specific level funding, and at that point, we need the funding secured. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. So in going through this last year, sort of 10-year strategic capital plan, there was a lot of opportunities that were identified. One around provincial and federal funding and opportunities to leverage that funding. The housing strategy and the provincial plan around housing affordability. Rapid transit, so the extension of the rapid transit system. And of course, Vancouver continues to see record levels of development and the support that the developers provide for that growth. But it's not without its challenges. So I spoke briefly at the beginning around that aging infrastructure. When we look out going into this next 10-year window, 30-year window, aging infrastructure is going to be a significant investment for the city. But in a growing city, you're also building new and upgraded amenities to support that growth. And of course, this last one, emerging priorities, seismic issues, climate change, resiliency for the city. We need to have a proactive plan to start to support that. And we can't ever forget the fiscal limitations. So municipalities actually are responsible for about 60% of the municipal infrastructure across the city. But of every tax dollar raised across Canada, only about 8 to 10 cents actually goes into the municipalities. Our biggest way in the municipalities that we raise funding is through property taxes. But when you think of the tax dollars, whether it be sales tax, corporate or federal tax. So financial sustainability, at the city what this means is when we look at living within our means. So ensuring that as we prioritize projects and look at them, that we're not putting undue burden onto future generations. Keeping debt at a manageable level. So City of Vancouver has a AAA credit rating, and that really speaks to how expensive it is for us to borrow money. So the better credit rating is, the best terms you get. Asset management, so that's a topic of aging infrastructure, and making sure that we're not just building new and upgraded facilities, but we're taking care of the facilities and the infrastructure that we do have. And then of course, affordability and cost effectiveness. So I mentioned that property taxes are the way that the city raises this significant portion of their funding, and it's keeping those taxes and fees affordable. One of the ways that we do that is looking at how Vancouver compares to some of their peer cities. So when we have Vancouver right now on a median single family home, we're a little lower than the average rate, sitting here at the $3,800 a year. And on an average single family home, we're a little bit higher than the average. So my next slides are going to talk to you about the 2019 to the 2022 capital plan. So in July of last year, the capital plan was approved. I saw actually there's a copy of the council report on your table there. At $2.8 billion. It was the largest capital plan the city has ever had approved. Here, looking at the purple shaded areas, is really the areas that were identified as growth. And then we have new community facilities, park projects, transportation projects. And you can see these are all scattered across the city, but really supporting those areas where we anticipate significant growth coming in. The capital plan is really split into both managing our existing assets and then also looking at new and upgraded facilities. So of that $2.8 billion, $1.5 billion is on investing in existing infrastructure. And most significantly, it's on that underground infrastructure, that water and sewer, over $500 million. Other things, we have the ground for bridge renewal for the seismic work on Granville Bridge, parks and open spaces, $77 million, and upgrades and major renovations to community centers. But it's also got to support growth. And so recognizing that we are going to need, as the city continues to grow, we're going to need new and upgraded facilities. So $1.3 billion is used to support the new assets coming into the city, of which the most significant is affordable housing at almost $500 million. Other areas to think about, the Granville Bridge Greenway as part of new transportation facilities, new parks and open spaces, which includes parkland acquisition, and new childcare facilities. So who pays for it? So the $2.8 billion, about $1 billion is through city contributions. And then we also have significant portions coming through development contributions, both in kind, which is when the developer provides the asset to the city, or in cash, where the city may provide the asset themselves. So city contributions would be through things like property taxes, tax-funded fees. Development contributions could be through donations of public art, community amenity contributions. And then partner contributions, provincial, federal, where do we have opportunities to develop partner contributions? And when do we pay? So here we have debt financing is about $500 million of our $2.8 billion plan. Pay-as-you-go means that we bring the money in the year that we're gonna actually use the money. So a good example there is water utility. We don't actually borrow any money in the water utility to do the work. We collect it as part of the fees annually to support the renewal program. Capital reserves is similar. We collect a little bit, knowing we're gonna replace that fire truck that costed $1.5 million in 5 years' time. We start to collect money on an annual basis to support that, so the cash is in the bank when it comes in. So to summarize, infrastructure and amenities are a significant part of this city, and they're really valued by the public. It really speaks to the experience people have in the city. A sizable portion of our infrastructure is coming up at its natural life cycle, and we need to plan for that. But we can't ignore those fiscal limitations. There's only so much the city has capacity to actually raise. For context, a 1% property tax increase raises about $7 million. And finally, as we look into the next capital plan, we're seeing a ramp up of our asset renewal in a financially responsible way. And that's it.
Okay, so what I would ask at this time, I'm going to just be able to take a few questions.